63 years of independence, 63 years of promises, 63 years of patience. It's time for governance now. Governance now. Let's make it work.
As you are aware, steel is integral to the growth of any economy and is one of the measures for assessing the prosperity and economic development of a nation. The demand elasticity of steel is more than 1 for most developing countries, which implies that if a GDP growth of 8 to 10% is to be achieved, steel industry would grow higher than that percentage. We are aware of the story of China, where massive economic growth over the last decade is closely linked to the steel production, which was increased from 127 million ton in the year 2000 to 568 million ton in the year 2009. Steel industry has undergone huge changes in the new millennium. The global crude steel production, which was just 190 million ton in the year 1950, has crossed 1.2 billion ton in the year 2009. One of the most important features of this development of the global steel industry was the shifting of the equilibrium from the predominant regions in North America and Europe to Asia, primarily led by China and followed by India. India's market share was just 2% in the global steel production, is having about 5% market share in the global steel production as of now. We'll notice that in the first 50 years of independence in India, the production was just 27 million ton. It increased just 27 million ton, but last 10 years it has increased by 27 million ton. So the growth which India achieved in steel production in the first 50 years of independence was equivalent to the growth which India achieved in steel production last 10 years. Indian economy has recorded an impressive GDP growth in the last few years. This financial year also it is expected to be around 8.5%, with rise in private consumption and investment demand. Approximately 125 million ton of steel will be needed to achieve these investments in infrastructure in 11th five-year plan. Assuming even if 75% of these investments materialize, then about 100 million ton of steel is needed on incremental basis just for infrastructure. Therefore, large potential for steel consumption is expected in India. Based on these parameters and the large potential, especially in the rural sector, the steel market in India is expected to reach a level of 180 to 200 million ton by the year 2020. For 2012, they are forecast that India's steel production capacity will touch a level of about 120 million ton. Given the projections made by the analysts, it is estimated that steel production will reach a level of about 500 million ton in India by the year 2050. While the world remains confident of India's consumption potential, there is a concern about the major challenges and the capacity breakers the industry is facing in India today, and they pertain to about the land acquisition. This has been a generic problem holding back India's industrial development, especially in the steel industry. Many mega steel plants have been delayed in India for years on this account. Second concern in India about the steel industry is raw material security. Economic sourcing the raw material is critical to the viability of any steel industry. Countries having good and natural resources would have competitive advantage. At present, raw material cost constitute about 60% of the total cost of steel production, out of which coking coal accounts for about 40 to 43%. Iron ore is the most important raw material for steel production and globally accounts for more than 25% of the total production cost of the steel. The India's coking coal suffers from the high ash content and the low calorific value. In fact, prime coking coal, which represents a superior quality, ideal for the steel making, constitutes only 16% of the total coking coal reserves in India. And that's why that huge quantities of coking coal reserves are blocked by large and small towns, and there are problems of the mine fires and water drainage from the old abandoned mines. And thus coking coal remains a challenging area for the Indian steel industry, for which industry should come together to find the solutions. Next problem in steel development in India is about the logistic challenges. Infrastructure and logistics indeed have significant impact on the steel industry and have huge cost implications for the industry too. Every ton of steel produced requires transportation of 4 tons of material. This implies that closer to 200 million tons of steel production by the year 2020 would require transportation of 800 million tons of material in India. This indicates the need for huge investments in key infrastructure including railway, ports and roads. Indian steel producers are spending much less on the R&D as compared to the international norms. The total spend of R&D in steel in India is hardly about 0.15 to 0.2% of the turnover, and the best in the world is about 2% of the turnover. Environmental challenge is another major challenge Indian steel industry facing today. Manufacturing industry as a whole contribute about 21% of the total greenhouse emissions in the world. Of this 21%, 15% is contributed by the steel industry of the world, which really means that about 3 to 4% of the total CO2 emissions of the world is contributed by the steel industry. Indian steel industry has to gear up to make investments in the area. Indian steel is generating 1.5 to 2 times more the greenhouse gases emission than the global standards, which have to be corrected. I am happy that steel and sustainable development is being talked together for the steel industry is indeed an integral part of a sustainable society. The traditional definition of sustainability calls for policies that meet the society's present needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. From a business perspective, the goals of sustainability are to increase long-term shareholders and social value while minimizing resource use and mitigating negative impacts on the environment. Our resources are not infinite, and the world is looking at ways to produce more with the less. Steel industry is no exception. Integrating sustainability in the steel sector calls for building such resilient and robust systems, anticipating and managing variables and risks, and also being the profitable industry. In fact, the sustainability of the steel industry depends on our ability to understand the criticality of the 5 assets, that is financial, human, environmental, social and technological. Society and steel industry benefit from each other in all the areas of sustainability, that is social, environmental and economic. In the social sustainability, it is a safe working environment which has to be ensured, employee training and education has to be ensured, community healthcare and schools have to be ensured, talented employees have to be ensured. In the environmental sustainability, eco-efficient steel products which have to be 100% recyclable, synergy with other industries to maximize the byproduct recycling, responsible use of the natural resources, and environmental laws and regulations compliance. In the economic sustainability, the quality steel products have to be produced, maximizing the shareholders' wealth is the aim. Employee wages and benefits, capital growth has to be ensured. Steel products to meet the changing and the growing demand.